The night my family tried to buy my silence, they served roast lamb and rosemary potatoes. That's what I remember first. Not the words, not the accusations, the smell of rosemary. It clung to the air like something holy, like we were there to bless something instead of bury it. Hi. If you're new here, welcome to Her Untold Revenge. Pull up a chair. Seriously. Some stories need to be told slow. Most families pass around bread. Mine passed around expectations. And that Sunday in April, they passed around a proposal that had my name printed in 12-point font at the top, like I was already owned. I was 39, divorced for just under a year, living in a one-bedroom apartment above a hardware store in Clarendon Mills, the kind of place where the floor creaks if you breathe too hard, and the neighbors know you've switched laundry detergent. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. After 12 years of marriage to a man who slowly edited me out of my own life, mine felt like oxygen. Margaret had called 3 days earlier. My sister never calls midweek unless she's rehearsed something. You can hear it in her voice do bright, like she's already imagining applause. "Dinner Sunday," she said. "Mom's cooking. Everyone's coming. It'll be good for you. Good for you." Those 3 words in my family usually meant brace yourself. I worked as a paralegal at a small firm downtown. Divorce cases mostly, custody disputes. Women sitting across from me whispering the truth like it might shatter if said too loud. I've read hundreds of agreements. I know what coercion looks like when it's dressed up as compromise. Still, when I drove up to my parents' house that Sunday, I told myself I was overthinking. Maybe it really was just dinner. There were too many cars in the driveway. That's always the tell. Margaret's SUV, Trevor's sedan, my father's Buick, my mother's car, and Uncle Don's rental. He lives in Ohio. He does not just drop by, not unless paperwork is involved. I sat in my Corolla for a full minute with the engine off. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked steady, calm, the kind of calm you learn after surviving something that was supposed to break you. I walked in. The chandelier was on. It's always on when my mother wants something. She bought that chandelier the year my grandmother died. Said it made the dining room feel serious. Trevor hugged me too stiffly. Margaret squeezed my hand and held it half a second too long. My father nodded. Uncle Don smiled without teeth. And there it was. On the sideboard, a navy folder, thick. No one mentioned it at first. We talked about the weather, about the school board, about a neighbor's new fence, the way families do when they're circling prey. Finally, my mother cleared her throat. "Helena," she began, using that tone that always meant performance. "Your sister and Trevor have been through so much." Margaret looked down. Trevor stared at his plate, and there it was. The story I already knew. 10 years of infertility, 3 rounds of IVF, a miscarriage at 12 weeks. The way Margaret had begun referring to herself as broken at Thanksgiving dinners, like she was reciting lines. I felt for her. I truly did. I had held her hand in waiting rooms. I'd driven her home from procedures. Grief changes people, but grief doesn't excuse them. "We've been exploring options," Margaret said softly, "and we realized we don't have to look far." My stomach dropped before she said it. "You could carry for us," she whispered. The room went still. My mother leaned forward. "It would be such a blessing. Sisters helping sisters." Trevor added quickly, "We'd cover everything, of course. Medical, expenses, all of it." And then Uncle Don reached for the folder. I didn't touch it at first. I looked at each of them, one by one. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. Margaret looked hopeful, desperate. My mother looked certain, like she had already decided the ending. "Can I read it?" I asked. "Oh, honey." My mother laughed lightly. "It's just standard. I'm a paralegal. Nothing is just standard." I opened it. 18 pages. The paper was heavy, expensive, cream-colored, the kind used for wedding invitations. The irony was almost funny. Page 1 was all warmth, family, love, generosity. Page 2 introduced reimbursements, but all payments routed through a joint account in Margaret's name. Page 3 outlined behavioral expectations. Diet restrictions, travel limits, required check-ins, mandatory counseling with a therapist selected by the intended parents. I felt my pulse steady, not spike. That's what happens when you're trained to read what others skim. And then I turned to page 4. There it was. a clause granting the intended parents full decision-making authority regarding the pregnancy, including selective termination based on medical or personal preference. Another clause stated that if I withdrew consent at any point after signing, I would be financially responsible for reimbursing prior fertility expenses $123,800 plus legal fees. That number was printed down to the dollar. I looked up slowly. Margaret was watching me. Not anxiously, expectantly. "You added penalties," I said quietly. "It's just to protect us," she replied. "From what? From me deciding my body belonged to me?" My mother leaned in. "After everything we've done for you." There it was, the ledger. The 6 weeks I'd stayed in Margaret's guest room after my divorce, the groceries I'd paid for, the cleaning I'd done, the way they would rewrite it as charity. "You owe her," my mother said. The word owe echoed in my ears. I closed the folder carefully, not dramatically, not angrily, just closed. "I won't sign this," I said. Margaret's face crumpled, but no tears fell. Trevor looked like he'd swallowed something sharp. My father inhaled but said nothing. "You're being selfish," my mother snapped. "Number." I thought, "I'm being sovereign." I stood. I thanked my mother for dinner. I kissed my father on the cheek. And I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I drove home at exactly the speed limit. By morning, the narrative had begun. Margaret posted about unexpected betrayal from someone we trusted with our hearts. My mother shared it with a Bible verse about sacrifice. They didn't name me. They didn't need to. Small towns connect dots fast. I read the post 3 times. Then I made coffee. I had photocopied the contract the Friday before dinner. Something in my gut had told me to. That Tuesday night, my friend Delia came over with red wine and a stack of black markers. We redacted every name, every address, every identifier. We left the clauses. We left the dollar amount. We left personal preference. I wrote a short caption. "If you are ever handed a contract at a family dinner, read page 4. I posted it. By morning, it had been shared over 1,000 times. A reproductive rights attorney commented about coercion. A local reporter messaged. Women I hadn't spoken to in years sent private notes saying, "Thank you." Margaret deleted her post by Thursday. Trevor showed up at my apartment Friday evening. He looked exhausted, smaller. "I didn't draft those clauses," he said. "Your mom pushed for them." I wasn't surprised. "She said if we didn't lock it down, you'd back out." I studied him. "And would I have had the right to?" I asked. He didn't answer. "I'm not your villain, Trevor," I said gently. "I'm just the one who read it." He nodded, eyes glassy. A month later, I heard they were in counseling. 2 months later, Trevor moved into a hotel. By fall, Margaret was on leave from her job as principal. The school board cited community concerns. I didn't celebrate. Revenge isn't fireworks, it's boundaries. My father came to see me one Sunday afternoon. Alone. "I should have spoken," he said. "Yes," I replied. We sat in silence. It was the most honest moment we'd ever had. That winter, something shifted in me. For years, motherhood had felt like a door that closed quietly behind my divorce. 2 miscarriages during my marriage had been treated like footnotes. I had stopped letting myself imagine. But one evening, Delia asked casually over pie, "Have you ever thought about adoption?" The question landed differently than my sister's request had. It wasn't a demand. It was an invitation. I began the process that spring. Home studies, background checks, interviews, paperwork that respected consent instead of bypassing it. 14 months after that dinner, I met Leona. She was 3, pink sneakers with scuffed toes, hair in uneven braids. She examined me like she was deciding whether I passed inspection. I knelt down. "Hi," I said. "I'm Helena." She pointed to the stuffed elephant in my hand. "Is that for me?" "It is." She took it, held it by the trunk, nodded once. "Okay," she said. That was it. That was the beginning. The day the judge finalized her adoption, my Aunt Lillian handed me a small orchid plant. "For new roots," she whispered. My father stood beside me in the courthouse hallway and said, "Hello, granddaughter." Leona rested her head on his shoulder like she'd been doing it forever. I did not invite my mother, or Margaret. Some branches of a family tree need pruning so new growth can survive. Now, on Saturday mornings, Leona sits at our kitchen table coloring while I make tea. The sunlight hits her hair in this soft golden way that makes me pause sometimes just to take it in. I think about that folder often, about page 4, about how close I came to signing something that would have turned my body into collateral. And I think about how no changed everything. If you've ever been handed expectations disguised as love, if you've ever been told you owe someone access to your body, your time, your silence, if you've ever felt the weight of a family ledger you didn't write, please hear me. You are allowed to read slowly. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to walk out without slamming the door, and sometimes the quietest refusal builds the loudest future. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to her Untold Revenge. There are more stories here about boundaries, about dignity, about women who chose themselves when it would have been easier not to. And share this with someone who needs the reminder that page 4 matters. I'll see you in the next one. The kettle's always on.